Never be afraid to change something. Don't feel so comfortable with something that may speak to you later. Because I'm such an avid dreamer, dreams that become very, very detailed. I went about finding inside me what kind of imagery, what elements would be fun to do. I used to embrace going to this place of nothingness and knowingness. I feel that there's an energy from that. That just seemed to open up this other universe for me. That became the catalyst for more. I prefer to go into the combinations of dreaming, daydreaming, contemplation, meditation, and vision work. In this odd case of being a human, I try to record as many things as I can. That's really served me well because it's like I'm inspiring myself. Revisiting is just as satisfying as starting a new piece. I find it exciting. In my dreams, I heard these sounds. That's what drew me to the drum set. It's such an odd instrument. We, as the musician, have to find a way to make these metal objects work with these other resonating objects. I saw it as an instrument that was malleable. So it was very much like playing sculpture, approaching your instrument with sticks, mallets, and brushes, bringing out the music, these objects with tools. It had this relaxed excitement about it. It was just magical.
Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest, where art, social justice, and the environment meet in Los Angeles. I am your host, Melina Paris, and I welcome you to this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Angel City Culture Quest. Today, we have Breeze Smith as our guest, and we're discussing breezeology. You'll find out what that means very soon. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Breeze, and then we're going to get started. Breeze Smith plays drums, percussion, and creates electronic live looping. An improvisational drummer, instrument designer, builder, visual artist, designer, and sound sculptor. He has completed several commissions for sculptures, paintings, designs, and soundtracks. Breeze's interaction with other musicians started at an early age in the Great Lakes region. His first recording was in 1966 with a local band. His growing interest in experimental, improvised music and his ever-expanding search for new sounds led him to incorporate his metal sound sculptures into his drum percussion universe. A guest artist performance led to Breeze's first sound sculpture commission. He completed a musical instrument design exchange with Stephen Wright, one of his ceramic Udu drums, for Breeze's invention, which is the Wright Alimba. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Tracks from his 2004 solo recording, Sight Sounding Backdrops +8, were used on the soundtrack for the documentary film The Real Rastafarian. Breeze says his journey of musical expression has gifted him with opportunities to create with so many, who I will add into our show notes. There's a lot of them, but these people also include the wonderful Dwight Tribble and duos with Breeze's wife, dancer, vocalist Cheryl Banks Smith. We're going to start with your artwork, Breeze. Artwork, sculpture, and music. We're going into those after we talk about a few paintings. But in your art making process, you recycle and reuse mostly all of your materials. And sometimes you even add materials to your paintings, which often gives them a textured appearance. I want to note that your use of light in your paintings, which adds to their vibrancy, depth, and energy, particularly in Say or Save. And the other one was XSR.
What that means. It's something that I started doing is when I became more deeply involved with painting in 2021. The few things that happened in my life, and it was time. It was the right time to get into it again. And what I came up with was the 3 E's, those that you see there, the XSR, and what that defines as excited, essential, eros.
What is the last one?
Eros. EROSE.
What does that one mean?
Aha. Yes.
Please tell.
I try to do things like that because I just like using words that, as you just made it clear, you're not familiar with that word. Eros, it refers to jagged or uneven. what I mean by that is that's a lot of things that I do being an improvisational painter as well. It's not often that I would do something that is symmetrical. So that's why I chose Eros for the last part of that title of the three E's.
That's great. As I was mentioning, the light in that piece and the other one, Say or Save, is extraordinary. It brings a certain energy. And with the other piece, Say or Save, there were words that just came to me when I saw the paintings on your website. And also when I saw them in person, it was like, yes, I remember that. And the feeling was still there. Say or Save reminds me of light or angels. The first one, XSR, is light, energy, but space as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's another painting that started off as a different one titled Elephant Swim. And that just made me happy. It was just very colorful, the reds, and there's movement in it, but it evolved into another painting. Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, it was something that I learned in the last year that I attended art college. And my professor said to never be afraid to change something. Don't feel so comfortable with something that may speak to you later. And that's what happened with the beginning. As I was doing Elephant Swim, I was happy with it. Yet the next day I came out and I saw something else in there. And that's what evolved into the Hill House Spirit. So it's, again, my facing the fear of like, oh no, this is too precious.
Mm-hmm.
And try not to do that.
Yeah.
So that evolved from one painting into the next. So I was happy though that, especially from how it spoke to you, the Elephant Swim, I was happy that at least I documented the changes. And that's what I feel even more comfortable with. You know, given that we have the chance to do really detailed photography now very easily off of phones or whatever device it might be, that I can actually capture what was there and then to see how that changes, how it evolves.
How it evolves. Yeah, exactly. And Hill House Spirit is a big subject, but my first reaction to it was playful because there's a face in there and the face seemed playful to me. It's a little bit of an odd reaction, I think, but that's the first way it struck me, but it's a beautiful piece as well.
Oh, thank you. Well, he is a playful character.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Now, you also do sculptures, and in your process, you explain that welding things together and making sounds interested you. In this way, I started coming closer and closer to the actual sounds that I had in my head from when I was a kid and couldn't find the instrument that would equate to that particular sound. So I constructed these musical sculptures that allowed me to create the music I really wanted in a performance. That way the rhythms had another whole palette of colors that I always wanted to reach but couldn't. That must have been so satisfying for you.
Yes, and that was even more exciting for me when I did my solo recording, because I incorporated all in each of those instruments in various sections of that recording. So that was very satisfying to be able to complete that.
All the sounds coming to life.
Yeah.
Now you have several sculptures. There's one called Earth Sails, and it was a commissioned piece. Can you talk about how you created that?
Sure. It was oftentimes, because I'm such an avid dreamer, dreams that become very, very detailed. And for Earth Sails, some sketches had come around and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I knew there was going to be a large piece, an outdoor piece. And there was one night that the image woke me up. And so I quickly grabbed some paper and started sketching. And that was the beginning of that particular sculpture, the 3 panels. I needed something that was kind of flowing. The piece is in the high desert and it's all aluminum. And I created those shapes that I wanted them to be, these sort of, how would I describe them? They're just kind of undulating shapes that I feel that they work together. And I used some new techniques that I had never used before. None that I had learned for creating on the surfaces, but I had to research how to do what I wanted to do, which was to bend these large sheets of aluminum so that they had a nice flowing curvature to them. I'll hit on the technique that I had to research, but the technique I used is drilling holes in specific places on those panels and then reworking the surface with chisels and different kinds of power tools to create this organic feel, because aluminum, of course, is not such an organic material. So I wanted to create that illusion or that connection to nature still in something that is just a piece of metal.
Right.
And there are some close-ups of some of the areas in there that I find really interesting. So let me go to what I had to research was how could I bend these sheets of metal? I thought it would have been somewhat simple, yet it was not, and created quite a challenge. So I found someone who does all sorts of things like that. And it's not an uncommon technique, but it's two vertical rods that are approximately 3 to 4 inches away from each other, and they are placed at an angle on a surface. In this case, I used a plank of wood. And by securing these two rods, then the aluminum sheets would go in perpendicular to the wooden base. And that way I can begin to bend with the help of those two rods. They help to secure it. But what I found out was that it was still too heavy. So I ended up placing the front end of my vehicle over that plank of wood so that it would hold the plank of wood in place. And then I started bending. I would love to have known what my neighbors thought when, drive by and see what is this person doing? But it was a great success. It was wonderful to find the solution that would bring this together. So I drove them out to the location, and my friend who commissioned me, Andre Caparaso. In fact, Caparaso is from the Caparaso Ensemble, that piece of music that maybe we'll talk about that later. So it was great. He was willing to help me, and it was really a fun process. Aside from the fire ants, they have fire ants out there. It was an uncomfortable part of the day.
Oh my goodness, I bet. That sounds like you've accomplished some engineering as well.
Yeah.
with that process. And they are so large, and I see why they're called earth sails, but they also sort of have a shape of a cloud in a way too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that whole organic connection, like you were mentioning. We're going to have a picture of those for folks to see on our website. So you can check out Earth Sails by Breeze. I just want to mention a few other of your sculptures before we move on. You have one that you title Trio Sculptures of Cast Bronze Nugget, and then another with stone and copper and cast bronze. And you were telling me about the energy from the nugget when we first talked, when I was visiting you. And this is a beautiful little piece. What inspired you to create this trio?
Well, it was a time that I was attempting to do the art fairs, the art shows, and I was talking with an art counselor. And because I am in that school of I love creating and not so successful at finding the business side of the things that I create. So I counseled with this gentleman, and he was saying that since I was doing these art shows and local art fairs, things like that, he said, well, it would be great if you could create something small where someone could see what you're doing. They could purchase it for a reasonable price, and they could actually carry it away with them right there. They don't have to come back to if it's a painting or if it's a large sculpture. Mm-hmm. So I went about finding inside me what kind of imagery and what elements would be fun to do. And as I'm always connected to nature, the idea of finding flat stones that were not so hard that I couldn't drill into them because I was hand bending these coils of copper tubing, and I drilled into the stone. All the stones are different, and finding, I guess, what I would call the nodal point, or the point on that stone, depending on the shape, that it fits in with the copper coil that is centered, is actually penetrating and going into that. And because that copper piping is literally a pipe, it's hollow. It's very thin. It's 1/4 of an inch in diameter. And so there are ways that sound can be created in that way with this connection to the stone. It has its own sound. And then the cast bronze, I call it the nugget, was from symbolism that I've been fascinated with, and some that have come to me in meditation. So it is a pyramidal shape, yet the base underneath, as you well know, is perfect for the thumb. The thumb can fit easily in there, and then between the first finger and the middle finger, it can actually comfortably fit right in there. And I feel that there's an energy from that, just the image itself and the actual physical touching of it. Above, if you look down onto the nugget, you can see it. There's also another spiral there. And then on the face is this image that I felt signified a universal spiritual awareness. Say, for example, the Ankh from Egypt, the cross, the fish, Christianity, and a lot of other symbolism. But this one in particular, which is a horizontal line that has a flare to it, and then that is close to a vertical line, also with a flare, and then above it is a ellipse or a sphere. And I feel that those together, not touching, and I think specifically not touching, that it feels more like a universal symbol for spirituality.
That's beautiful. And your thumb does fit very comfortably in there. It's a wonderful piece. And
thank you.
When you mentioned looking down from the different angle, looking down into the spiral, you call that raven's eye view?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated with a lot of birds, but specifically ravens.
Yeah, beautiful birds.
They are.
There's several, but there is another one called zebra breeze. But we're going to discuss that one more a little bit later when we get to the music. One of the main things you said that was important to you is that you look at your art from a spiritual perspective, but not necessarily in a conventional way. Growing up, you attended church for a number of years, and then your father wanted to leave the church after he became fascinated with Catholicism, and he wanted to convert. Your mother did not. And when you sensed that separation, you said you started to look at what was spiritual for you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? That was during the late 60s, right?
That started early, the exit from conventional religion. I was maybe 10 or 11, so that would have been in the 50s. But then, yeah, I started looking around. Those years, nature meant more to me than anything else. And I had a sense of what now I know to be meditation, when I would just, by daydreaming or closing my eyes in the middle of the day, I would just go to these places. Like there was something that I used to do to myself as a child mentally. And it was what I labeled finally as understanding nothingness. Imagine what it would be like if there was nothing. What would that be like? How could I even rationalize that? And when I first experienced it, it was almost frightening. And like some of the other things that happened in my life, I just had this innate way of approaching things in terms of fear and facing fear. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was just the right thing for me to do, was to face these things that seemed fearful, like the wind. So I used to embrace going to this place of nothingness. And that just seemed to open up this other kind of universe or dimension for me of awareness. And that became the catalyst for finally, as you were saying, then in the late 60s, I first started reading about astral projection. And then after being successful at astral projecting, I wanted more of a substance, I guess I would say. And that's when I started studying Buddhism, specifically Zen at that time. And then going further, my spiritual awareness to transcendental meditation, studied other religions along the way. They felt really comfortable and they felt right, aside from the fact that they seemed still a little too traditional for me, mainly because I just didn't want to be within that belief solidly. That wasn't comforting for me. I needed more. I needed to search further. And then eventually with Eckankar, which was another stepping stone for me, that felt very, very comfortable because of the fact that they lived their entire existence, not only waking, but dreaming as well. They create the methods of dream journaling. They refer to what they do in terms of their spiritual depth is contemplation. And for me, that makes a lot of sense to contemplate. Why am I here? How do I exist in these kinds of circumstances, these places? I prefer to go into the combinations of dreaming, daydreaming, contemplation, meditation, and vision work. So visioning other possibilities in this odd case of being a human and awareness of soul. So at this point, I still study other options. So that's where I am now, is that I don't have any specific way of my spiritual life. It is a combination of all those. And it depends on the time and the moment that I may be focusing on the word that we used when I was doing transcendental meditation, or the word that you used in Ekankar, or none of those, or just allowing my spirit to go further to experience what soul is as a human being.
I really like that contemplation, and then your desire to go further in contemplation. It seems like a very well-rounded and intelligent approach towards contemplating of all of this that's out there around us. I don't know if I want to call it a philosophy, but for lack of a better word. But I like that.
Another thing I found even more fascinating was, as I was going deeper into Buddhism, that place that I would take myself to as a child, the nothingness, that kind of fits by just allowing things to be. So it is kind of like that, but I would say that's nothingness in knowingness.
Wow. That's a long line between the two, but
Yeah.
but maybe not, it depends. We're getting off into a whole different thing, but it's very interesting. I like the approach of it because you're finding your own way, but it's honest. And it sounds like it helps a human evolve when you're doing serious contemplation and knowingness and nothingness. I mean, imagining nothingness is, I can't even wrap my head around that at this particular moment. So I praise you for your determination to stick to that and to do that.
Well, it's driven. It's from within that I do that, because it creates for me a foundation of existing in a world that is that can be can be quite bizarre.
It would help a lot of us to do this, I think. Also, I just want to note that when we were talking about this earlier, you said because in music it's so immediate, you said to have creative abilities is absolutely a gift, and it's healing for you in the process. It's healing and inspiring to realize that through whatever it is I'm doing, be it a visual piece that someone is moved by because they sense something from the image, but especially in music, because in music, it's so immediate. If it's a piece of artwork that's at an exhibit, I may not be there for that exhibit when somebody may walk through and have a sensation. But in music, you were just commenting about having that immediate reaction. And it was while we were talking about a lot of this. So it's interesting to hear that coming from you when you think about doing artwork on your own time, in your space, and then doing another form of art as music and connecting with people so immediately and how it affects you. There's a little bit more. You have your artwork and your sculpture, but you also do a little bit of poetry. And we're moving into talking about poetry, influence, and memory. And around this time, we were talking about in the 60s and you evolving a little bit. You said in 1969, towards the end of high school and during the beginning of art school, you began writing. And it evolved from there as you met visual artists, poets, and then lyricists for music. You said you were inspired to incorporate things that you were sensing or imagining while you were doing a visual piece of art or music. And you would just start writing things down, and some of them ended up being the lyrics for music. It was like your imagination stepped in and grabbed you and allowed you to visualize things, often from nature, guiding you in different directions while you played music. But this includes urban nature as well, when you discovered white noise from the freeways, which started to be built near you when you grew up in Ohio. These days, though, when you're creating artwork on your deck, you said you have an audience. There's a hummingbird that comes by to watch you and a family of house finches. And then again, you mentioned the raven. You have a strong connection with some ravens. All of this has influenced you, and some of it, you said, becomes a metaphor of something you've read that could find itself in a poem you write. And you believe strongly that we can influence ourselves. Can you describe how you've done this?
Yes. There are times that I will put something that I've created. That's easy for me to do with a painting or a drawing or an old piece of music that maybe isn't finished. And to revisit those things I find it exciting in that leaving something alone or keeping it out of my sight or listening to music that I've created, revisiting it is just as satisfying as starting a new piece of work, whatever that might be, sculpture or anything else. So then I will do the opposite. Rather than putting it out of sight, I'll put the painting up on the wall so that I can be revitalized by something that I created before that means something very new to me because of changes that I've gone through from when it was first created. And the same with music. I try to record as many things as I can musically, and that's really served me well because I've found things, first of all, with some of the things that I do, because I have so many different instruments. Oftentimes I will listen to something and I'm questioning myself, what in the world, what instrument is that you used or how did you approach it? And so again, it's like I'm inspiring myself by just looking at things or listening to things that I've created before.
You also said you experience all the senses in your dreams: touch, sound, smell, and always colors. Do you think that this influenced you to become an artist?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's to the point now where it even involves taste because I'm doing a lot of cooking these days. So I'm in someone else's kitchen or I'm in kitchen in my dream. And I create different sauces or things like that, and then I'm tasting them. So yeah, it's definitely there. It is again. Yeah, I'm influencing myself.
I just want to note, since you're starting to cook, that could be another element you're adding to Breezeology.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Another exploration. If you're just tuning in, today we're speaking with Breeze Smith, musician, artist, and Breezeology. Hi folks, this is your host, Melina Paris. Angel City Culture Quest is growing. We're barely into our third year now, and there's so much more quest-worthy inspiration to bring you. Art, books, film, coverage of local events, and more. We've gotten a new QR code so you can capture episodes on the go because I know you're busy. We've been creating artistic flyers unique to each episode and new Angel City Culture Quest stickers. And there's more to come. As you know, there are costs to keep this podcast going. So, if you're able, join me in this quest with your support. Think of it as a cultural tip jar to share any amount that you're comfortable with. Even a few dollars a month will contribute to my ability to continue bringing you the great work of these artists, activists, and others, and the cultural content that you want to hear about. I would be honored to have your support. To donate, please go to my Patreon link at patreon.com/Angel City Culture Quest. There you can also see all of our past episodes. Thank you. You said television, when it first came out, was really good for you because then you saw things differently in nature and around you. And an artist that you saw on TV had a big influence on you too. That would be John Cage. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, when we finally had a television in the house, it was pretty mesmerizing for me. And of course, there were 3 local stations and then the offshoot station, which was through the university. Public broadcasting, basically, from those times. However, in those days, you had to actually dial it in. You would go onto that channel, and then you had to fine-tune it to get there. The first one I saw, which was, I think that was with a classical piece of music, that was with Martha Graham. I saw her dancing, and that really intrigued me. I never thought of myself as a dancer, but when I saw Merce Cunningham, and for his soundtrack, for his choreography, he used John Cage. I mean, the two of them worked together, I think, all the way up until each of them passed. And his approach to music and sound was just intriguing to me. And I found out years later that he was one who did this technique where by placing a metal object, a metal instrument, be it a gong or a cymbal, and allowing that after striking it, usually with a mallet, and then dipping it into water then the science comes into it. So then it's ascending and descending, coming into the water, coming out of the water. And it sounded like nature to me, but when I found how that was created, that opened up another pathway for me. I think I even had some of those old, I think I played that for you, the old cast aluminum pot lids.
Yeah.
That I use that for effects the same way, striking with a mallet or using a violin bow to activate the vibration in that piece, and then slowly putting it into the water and then bringing it back out, ascending and descending that note, that tone, that pitch.
That's really cool. You said they created sound images in your audio memory that you kept hearing.
Mm-hmm. I think you actually mentioned that earlier, that in my dreams, I heard these instruments. That's what drew me to the drum set. But there were still these sounds in my head that I could not find the instrument. That was when, years later, when I was working with metal so much, that these objects I could find could be created.
Yeah. And one of those was, as we mentioned earlier, your instrument you titled the Zebra Breeze. Can you talk about why you titled it that?
Well, it first comes from my fascination with the animal. They're whimsical to me. And the look, it's undeniable. But what I found even more intriguing about them as they are together with many of them, it's one of the ways that they, looking so unique as they do, when they run together, closely together, they're able to fool any predators. It's not so easy to find their necks, because that's oftentimes where predatory cats will go, of course, for the neck to bring down an animal of that size. That's why I have a couple of improvisational groups that I work with that I call Zebra Logic, given the fact that everyone is improvising and creating, and everyone is individual in their own unique way. Yet when we work together, listening and playing together, then we work as one. So that's the logic of the zebra.
Yeah.
And the reason that I call that instrument that, as I saw those stripes, these vertical curved aluminum rods, that's what it made me think of, were the stripes on a zebra.
Let's listen in to Zebra Breeze. Now, you said that this journey, hearing these new sounds and recalling the sounds that you heard from when you were a child, that journey put you on the course to find what instrument that you wanted to play. The drum set interested you for a few reasons. Can you talk about what those were?
Yes, it came close. It's such an odd instrument. The combination of these metal objects that we, as the musician to play this instrument, have to find a way to make these metal objects work with these other resonating objects, round, usually wooden, and with a membrane on the top. It's unusual. And that intrigued me. Mainly, though, it was the fact that it was changeable. The cymbals don't have to always be up high or at an extreme angle. The drum set can be altered in terms of where does this drum go in relation to that one. I saw it as an instrument that was malleable, shall we say, that I could change it to fit what I wanted to do, how I wanted to approach the instrument. So it was very much like playing sculpture. And that was really fascinating for me. I mean, not that every instrument isn't a piece of art. It's different when you're approaching your instrument with sticks, mallets, and brushes, and you are enhancing and bringing out the music from these objects with tools. These are the tools that we use for the instrument.
I just thought it was fascinating. In your studio, you were playing the different drums and the different percussion items. And I don't remember the name of the drum. It's a tiny one. I think it's maybe immediately in front of you. And you hit it rapidly. And instantly I was transported to Brazil. And it is a Brazilian drum. What was the name of that one?
That's a tamborim.
Okay. The sound. I was there. Instant. And then the other one, there's a sort of membrane, I think you said. It's just a thin, almost like a piece of paper, and you put that on top of one of your drums. And there's a difference from before you have it on there and then after you put it on. And again, I was transported this time to Africa. I forget what that one was called too. A little black paper type of thing that you put on top of the drum.
It's actually, it would be as if you would cut out the center of a drum head, a plastic drum head. So it is a plastic membrane. It's actually adhesive. There is a backing part that has paper. If I would peel that off, I could actually stick that onto the surface of the drum heads. And what I learned about application on drums and cymbals, I learned that from watching orchestral percussion. There's a technique that's used on a timpani drum where they invert a cymbal in the center of a timpani drum, and then by using mallets, they will crescendo or swell the sound from that cymbal. But because the timpani has a foot mechanism that changes the tension of the head, it actually has this woo, 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 woo that it can do. And there are other things that they do in orchestral music, especially in the percussion family, where they apply different things on top of lesser known objects. So combining objects together like that, I've found to be really, it's satisfying for me because of exactly what you said. It changes the entire character of these instruments by placing objects on top of them. That was an inspiration from when I lived in Denmark. Finding musicians, meeting musicians from Morocco and Cairo and Turkey, and hearing these really beautiful instruments, hand percussion, most of them, that I'd never been around, but yet they sounded so comfortable to me. So since those times, I play some of those instruments now, some of the hand percussion. But what my point is, that's what I try to do with the drum set. I try to bring in the influences from Brazil, from parts of Africa, from Turkey, from India, and to incorporate those sounds so that I can kind of emulate that into a particular piece of music that wouldn't necessarily go in those directions.
Exactly. Now, you also shared that you have dyslexia, but you did not know that when you were in school, which made it really difficult for you to learn. But thanks to your mother, you were able to take art classes. You spent more time in the art department than anywhere else during your last year in high school, which turned out to be auspicious for you because of two teachers. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, they kind of took me in. At that point in my life, I was an extreme introvert. That was one of the things that I also enjoyed about the drum set, because when I was playing drums on stage as a teenager, I felt this distance from the audience, so that even though I was on stage with lights and everything else, it made me more comfortable as an introvert. That has fortunately since changed. But at that point in my last year in high school, Mr. Spratley and Mr. McDowell, unbeknownst to me, they were formulating a portfolio, and they presented that portfolio to the Columbus College of Art and Design. And I received a first-year scholarship because of that. It was life-changing for me because of them doing that. It just opened up all these new worlds, and I'm forever grateful to.
They were forming the portfolio of your work and you didn't know it.
Yeah, had no idea.
That's what teachers do. That's what makes them great.
Yeah.
And then you said during your second year at the college became accredited. Subsequently, people came in from all over the world to attend. And what came with that was more music. And you just mentioned that the similar thing happened when you were living in Denmark during the 1980s, when you said that they had open borders and musicians came from everywhere to play, which had a big influence on you. In fact, in describing Imagination on your website, you mentioned great gratitude for your years in Europe.
Oh my, yes.
That message has been so eye-opening for you. And how old were you then when you went to Europe?
I would have been between 31, 32, somewhere in there, because the fascination had always been there. I'm grateful to my father that he was always wanting to travel around as a family, and we had a lot of bizarre things that would happen. We would just get in whatever car he had at the time and take off and drive it everywhere. In other words, it opened up my imagination for travel. And Europe was somewhere that I was always just longing to experience. So I had the opportunity in 1979 when I was working in lithography as an apprentice. And the owner of the company I was working for, we worked many, many hours. And at one point I told him, I said, I don't have a private life. And he said, just hang in there a little bit longer and I have a surprise for you. So it was about 6 months later that he gifted me with a trip to Europe. He paid for my flight and just gave me the time off.
Wow.
So
nice.
I spent 4 weeks as a 29-year-old just going crazy. And I went from England to Belgium to Holland to Germany, down to Austria, to Italy, to Greece, and then spent some time in France. I told myself along the way, someday you will be living on this side of the Atlantic. And it didn't take long. It was almost like synchronicity. It became my affirmation, and it happened.
Oh, wow. That's a wonderful experience.
Yeah. It opened so much about my life. And one of the things was, it was fascinating to see the country that I was a citizen of from another perspective. And I think that may have been another inspiration for me to learn Danish as quickly as possible. I didn't like what I saw on the streets. A lot of Americans that were just not my kind of folks, the way they approached their travels, in this case in Copenhagen. So I saw the US from a whole different perspective. Reading the European version of Time magazine about things going on. At the time, it was about a jetliner that mysteriously went down. And I spoke with my father, and he said he read the same thing. It was two entirely different perspectives of the same incident. So things like that just made me really step back. It was almost like I became another person, and I like who that person is.
Yeah, good. I do too. Yeah. That says a lot, different perspectives like that. It really does wake you up when you realize those kinds of things. And this brings us to fighting your fears. You were in Copenhagen for a number of years. Eventually, you made your way back. And when you were in Ohio, you met your wife, Cheryl. And then after some time, you ended up having to return to LA for your family. But initially, it was a real struggle for you and a fight that you had to have with yourself to realize that you could find your way. How did you get through that struggle?
Meditation helped, but even that was a struggle for me at the time. My father-in-law had just passed before I moved to LA in 2000. And I wanted to be there for my mother-in-law. And she helped a lot to just help me to find a way to ground. My brother came to visit me after I'd been in LA for probably 10 months or so. And I whispered to him as he was leaving, I said, I hate this place. And he pulled me in a hug and he said, try not to hate where you are. And that was a huge opening. That was really a great thing. Then when I started meeting musicians here and other artists, then I realized, okay, there are some other reasons for me to be here. and,
Yeah.
and it was just magical. I was fortunate enough at one point, I was living in West LA. And when I was working as an apprentice in woodworking for a furniture designer, which is where I learned how to do bronze casting, by the way. It was so close to the house that I was able to walk to and from work. And that was another good thing for me to make this transition, to be on the sidewalk and walking with other people that were getting their foundation, what they were doing. And it was really good for me. On my walk to work, I would see them every morning. And the first 3 times I'd said hello to them, they wouldn't respond. Finally, the same person that I would see, and it opened up just a connection. That was all, just hello.
Yeah.
And I needed that. That was the kind of stuff I needed. It would make me feel more like me. And being in the city, being in LA, and the intensity of LA at that point for me was overwhelming.
I could see how that could ground you and how that could actually turn into a good experience.
Yes, it did.
The connections, like you said.
Yeah.
But in terms of facing your fears, you talked about early in your life, one of your biggest fears that you conquered, the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I would love if you could elaborate further with the sound.
Sure. Yeah, growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I was born 49. And so through the 50s, the weather, it's still quite unpredictable, especially in central Ohio. The wind that would go through between the houses, and because it's so flat there, it was intense. And it just had all these sounds that to me were scary. It was fearful for me. So I remember pulling the cover over my head. So eventually, because I would hear it all the time, my imagination opened up and I decided to match the sounds I heard. And why I did that, I don't know. A psychologist today would say that that's what I was doing. I was facing my fear by embracing what it is. So I taught myself how to make the sound of the wind, and it was great. It was like I was having a little conversation with the wind, or I was trying to harmonize with the wind. So then my ears became even more in tune with all the various sounds, the really strong winds, the ones that sound like they're swirling. And I'm able to create that with this technique that I learned many, many years later from Glenn Velez. I did a workshop with him on overtone singing, and overtone singing is such a fascinating technique. So then, as I worked on overtone singing, I went to meditation, and there was a man there from France, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, Breeze, tell my friend here how you come to be called Breeze." And so I did that, and he put his ear up close to me, and he said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I said, I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't know. Tell me, what am I doing?" He said, "You're creating overtone singing without using your vocal cords." So he said, "You're doing the exact same thing with the position of how much your mouth is open and how you curl your tongue in all directions, concave part of your tongue or convex, and then the shape as you look at it from the side as it curls or not." And so that was the beginning of realizing that I was facing my fears and ended up getting myself in trouble as a little guy in classroom because of my issue that I didn't realize I had, the dyslexia. I hated reading because it would put me to sleep. And so we had reading time in elementary school, and it wasn't quite summer, but it was a temperature that the windows could be open in the classroom. And I was sitting near the back, and as I was at least looking at the pages in the book, I decided to start making the sound of the wind. And the teacher stood up and she went to the windows. She stood at the window. She closed each of the windows that were open. So then I stopped. And she sat back down at her desk, and I waited for a few moments, and then I started doing it again. And so she went to the door to see if the door was maybe slightly open. And then she just calls out in the class. She says, "Okay, somebody in here is making that sound. Who's doing it?" And there was a girl that was sitting in the next row over from me. And she says to the teacher, she said, "He's doing it. He's been doing it all along." And so she said, "All right, young man, you go and stand in the back of the room." And of course, I didn't stand very long before I started doing it again.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah. So she made me, she says, all right, I want you to stand out in the hallway and you'll wait. The principal's going to come and talk to you. So he didn't arrive, but by the end of the day, I was told to never do it again. And the next time there would be a consequence.
Yeah. Well, can we hear the reason for the consequences? Thank you, Breeze. So you've been practicing all these different forms of art your entire life, which is clear just looking at all the different work that you do. And just listening to you, there's an endless curiosity in you to still do more, to create more, and to use different materials. You utilize everything so well, recycling materials. You put discarded or found materials in your paintings sometimes. That's in part what makes your paintings so unique, I think. But with all this, do you have a favorite form of art that you do?
No, I do not have a specific one. It's always changing. And I think that's probably some part of my brain that says, don't get attached because you might miss out on something that
Something else, yeah.
Yeah, something I learned from my father. He said, there are choices in life. And he said, if an opportunity comes around, you could almost look at it as if it's in a coil or in a circle. And if you decide not to take that opportunity when it comes around, it may come around again. However, you may not know how long it will take for that opportunity to arise. So that's where I think I place myself in terms of my imagination and creativity. I want to stay as open-minded as possible. And I have sketchbooks here and there. And sometimes when the ideas come through so quickly, I realize, okay, there's no way I can work on that sculpture. So I will either write it out, what I believe it is and what the materials would be, or if it's a painting, some just really quick, rough sketch of what it would be with maybe a list of colors. So I try to do that for myself.
Sort of the building blocks of it in a way.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. And that's words of wisdom from your dad. So you bring this spiritual connection into everything that you do, and it seems to connect to people. Do you think it does?
Seems to. I've been in many situations. I had a position after moving back to Columbus, the weekend manager at an import shop. And it was fascinating because it opened up a lot of worlds for me. I became a much better listener in those days. And I met so many people that were involved with the conversation. They were doing more talking than I was. And they stopped and they said, I have no idea why I'm telling you this, because I don't normally talk to people about these things. Those kinds of moments, and I've had so many moments like that in my life. A couple of times people that I'm talking with, they brought up a memory that they had through talking to me about their own lives, that they actually ended up in tears. And I feel that's a reflection of staying in tune with my inner self. I try to be as open as possible. There have been a couple of times that's been a bit of a detriment or an altering aspect of my life because of trusting too much. And I'm still learning more about that because I am extremely open and curious. In fact, one of my old colleagues, when I was teaching after school programming, he said, the thing that I find interesting about you is that you're culture curious.
Yeah.
And I've always been like that. That served me well, of course, when I was living in Denmark.
Yeah. And I think the thing about people opening up to you, I think maybe there's a sense of safety, not anything that's verbalized. It's just there and it's intuitive, I think. That's probably what it is. Because, like you said earlier, you've been doing all this work and grounding yourself. So that becomes obvious on a sensorial level.
Yeah,
So let's talk about music.
sure.
First, I'd like to know, you had mentioned the CD earlier, the Caporasso.
Yeah, that's Andre
Yeah.
Cabrasso.
You said it's a special recording. Why is that?
It's once again all improvised. Jim Goach is somebody that I've always wanted to do some collaboration with, some playing, some improvising. And it was through Andre and I think the other guys in that particular quintet. They knew him and had done things with him, but it was my first time. He lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so when he chiseled out time to come in, and fortunately, there was a chance for that same quintet to do a live performance before we did the recording. So it was really wonderful. I mean, from the opening of the set that we had, it was just, I knew it was going to be magic. And that really felt like a wonderful way to do it, to have the performance first and then get in to do the recording. Because of the fact that it's improvised, I think that was beneficial. I know that a lot of musicians work the opposite way. They like to do the recording, but that's usually when it's composed pieces and then take it out to get a response from an audience. The way that recording was done, it had this relaxed excitement about it, is the way that I would describe it. It just felt really great in the studio. And once again, people who like to use their ears as much as their talent on their instrument was really a very special thing. The thing that really is amazing for me is that it's not often that I go into a studio and the recording is there, the details on where microphones would be and for which instrument and so on. And it's seldom that I hear a finished recording that it sounds the way that my instrument sounds from where I'm sitting. The finished recording sounds more like what it would be if someone was in front row of a performance.
Mm-hmm.
And my instrument sounds very different in those ways. I like the way it sounds from the audience side, and I tune and select cymbals for that perspective. It's different when you're sitting behind the instruments. It's a different sound. It's not the same. On this particular recording, because of the placements of the mics and the mics that were selected, which was minimal, that's what I love about people like my friend Tony Green. He and I agree on this. We used a mic for the bass drum, a mic for the snare, in between the snare and the hi-hats, and then 2 overhead mics, and that's it. And it really captured the sound of my instrument. So then from there, because of Jim Goach's experience, he has found a way when he did the remix and the mastering of it, for my ears, after coming up hearing recordings on 78s and 45s and
Everything.
full vinyl, yeah, everything. I've heard it all. And I've heard it on all kinds of equipment. Not that I've always had the best equipment to listen to recordings. However, my point is, it sounds in this recording to me as if it's a beautiful blend of analog recording and digital recording, because it has a warmth to it, yet the warmth would be in the analog, and then yet there is a crystalline aspect of it to it, which is from the sound of my ride cymbal if I'm playing lightly. And I can hear it in there. So the details, it would be more from the digital side.
I think you nailed it there. The first thing that came to my mind was this very organic, and I think that's that analog sound. But it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I was so honored that when they did these final mixes, that there's several tracks that they gave me the intro to, I think at least three pieces. It's me. I'm either playing electronic percussion or acoustic drum set.
And I want to mention your painting is on there too.
Oh, yeah.
On the CD cover.
Yeah.
Is the title Encounter?
That's the title of the project of this particular recording. It happened because as we took a break, Tony has this beautiful outdoor space that looks out into the valley in the canyon where his house is. The subject came up about aliens and spacecraft and this elongated conversation. So that was when Jim and Andre decided that they would title the piece Encounter.
That's great. But this is a beautiful painting too. There's a lot of energy in it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And then the inside it's not the exact same painting, but it's in that same kind of series that I was doing at the time. And Jim, he loves the old vinyl of the record label Verve. Verve. And they had a sort of a style of the way they did their graphics. And that's what he was mimicking. He was hoping to give tribute to the old Verve recordings.
Nice. Hi, folks. Thank you for listening in on this special episode of Breezeology. We wanted to share with you Breeze's recent collaboration with the Caporaso Ensemble's release, Encounter, was featured in the May edition of Downbeat magazine, and, no less, with Breeze's artwork on the cover. Of the album, Downbeat said, Encounter is a completely improvised electronic jazz composition created by some of the leading figures in the Los Angeles left field jazz. Find the link in our show notes, which leads to a video of Caporaso Ensemble performing at the Oracle Tavern in downtown LA. Thank you for listening. And then the other one, you have one called Nova Madrugada.
Oh, yeah. It's an ever-changing ensemble, but it's spearheaded by Roger Hines on upright composition and my brother, Stan Smith, on guitars. They always bring in some of the most captivating musicians, and I was so honored that they wanted me to be featured on the title of that particular recording, Second Spirit.
Yeah.
So they gave me this really extended intro on that piece.
There's a lot in there. The sounds that I clued into were like the bird sounds, which obviously you're making, the cymbals, the string, the bass sound. You have rattles and a gong and bells, I think, and more, I'm sure.
Yeah. The isolation booth was pretty much filled. I had just enough space to move in the center to go from one instrument to the next.
Don't make any false moves.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It sounds like you're wandering through a labyrinth or adventuring on a journey.
There you go.
It's all encompassing and holistic. It's really wonderful.
My brother titled that because first he did that piece of music, and then it evolved that he and Roger decided to call the entire project Second Spirit. So Second Spirit is a sensation, realization, experience that happens in Judaism when you're with someone, and it could even be the first time you're with them, that you're around them, that you're having conversation or food or an experience together, and you feel so strongly about that person that in your mind, you would say to yourself, okay, this is my second spirit. That might sound simple. My explanation may not be as precise, but it's really powerful. And that's something that my brother experienced when he was in performance in Dresden, Germany. And he had the opportunity to work with Gunther Baby Summers. And that's what my brother told me. He said, now I know what it's like. Because my brother is Jewish. He converted to Judaism. And it's been wonderful for me because he's educated me in things that I had no idea. But Baby is such an amazing musician. And because of the fact that they weren't able to bring him over from Dresden for the recording, my brother and Roger asked me, would you do the intro to this piece and then play through the piece? And I was just like, wow, It was such an honor. And I was transported when I was in the studio in the isolation booth. I was in a new world.
That's amazing. That's so wonderful. What a great experience. Wow.
Yeah, it really was very special.
Yeah. And the whole album is really nice.
And that's my artwork on there.
Oh, which one is that?
The outside and the inside. And there's art on the disc itself.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's beautiful.
I like to do photography, but I wouldn't call myself a professional photographer. But I love to use photography as another art form. And not only in the images that I capture, but finding the ways to manipulate those images so that they may look like something other than what they really are. Like the outside is a spider web that was very abstractly created by, I don't know what kind of spider. And then underneath that was this silver tarp that was wrinkled. And as I photographed that, it took me into another place. I was just like, wow, this is another new venture.
Totally. I could see that.
And on the inside, it's a concrete floor that a business took over an old gas station. And they left the concrete floor, but they stained it with this like sort of dark green color that brought up. It was slightly transparent. So you can still see the bits of concrete, little tiny places that are different throughout that. And that's the inside cover. And on the disc, it's still life from here at the house.
Oh, you're so resourceful with everything that you capture. I wanted to mention earlier with your artwork, you talked about putting the painting within a frame that has these bolts where you could push them and the painting will rotate so you can look at it from a different angle.
Yeah, that's an invention that I would like to create. It's very simple, actually. It works on the same basis as a socket wrench, which has ball bearings that can flex like a spring inside. So the paintings would be mounted from the very center on one of those, so that if someone would just simply push in to retract the ball bearings, then they could turn it as many times as they would like. And then as they would release it, it comes back to a locking position. Because most of my paintings I see from different sides. And even when I hang them in our home, I rotate them. It's something else that I learned from that last year with a professor in painting class. So back to the art exhibit. In that way, if a person went through the entire exhibit, they come back and they go through it again, they might see it from a completely different perspective. The painting might speak to them in a different way. Mm-hmm. And it's just much more interactive.
Yeah. You had also said when you're actually creating a painting, you look at it from different angles. When you're outside on your deck, you have the round table that you paint on and you go from one side to the other and approach it from all those different angles. It's a very unique approach.
That way I can actually walk all the way around the pieces I'm working on it. It's very successful for me because I see things differently each side that I look at, and it inspires me to add more of something or try to find a way to mask something that I don't feel really works. Basically, eliminating shapes that are there with a larger color.
So let's get to Cosmic Vibrations. The album that I listened to is called Pathways and Passages. Wonderful, wonderful album. And you said a couple performances will be coming up with Cosmic Vibrations, which we'll get to. But first, the group is made up of John B. Williams on acoustic bass, Durf Rekla, who unfortunately passed away in 2022, was on congas and percussion and flute, Pablo Calogero on tenor sax, bass clarinet, woodwinds, and flute, Christopher Garcia, indigenous percussion, and you on drums, percussion, and loops, and Dwight Tribble on vocals. But of course, he's the initiator of the whole thing.
Even though he still says that he doesn't want to be leader, Dwight and I, we are so close. We're really tight. So he calls me the co-leader.
Dwight is great. And his voice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's nothing like
it. It's otherworldly. Yeah. It's completely.
I mean, it really is. Yeah. And when that man is on stage, his spirit it becomes massive. I mean, the way that he interacts with us on stage together, but then the way that he interacts with the audience, it's like, okay, we just stepped into the living room now. We're just having a good time. It's so magical.
Yeah. It's a great story how the group came together. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I think it was 2017. Dwight had a dream, and in his dream, he saw each of us and he heard music happening and he felt it in a very, very strong spiritual way. And so he sent out an email to each of us and he said, "This is what I'm envisioning. You guys let me know if you're interested. However, no rehearsals. We improvise, we create." And everyone agreed. And it was only a few months later that we had our first concert at the world stage. And it was absolute magic. I've never experienced anything like it. I hadn't worked with anyone in the group except Dwight. Dwight and I had worked on another project a few years prior to that. Everything was just so new.
And you had the connection instantly. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was incredible. And everyone was listening and no one was trying to be overplaying or be seen or heard stronger than anyone else. It was just absolute harmony. And working with that configuration was so amazing. It was just as fascinating to be in the green room with those guys I remember when we played a UCLA concert and we were in the green room after we did sound check, and I was almost disappointed when they called in and said, okay, you guys are in. You'll be in 3 minutes or whatever it was, head onto the stage, guys.
No, we want to stay here.
Yeah, I want to stay in this moment. I'm hearing all these great stories from these guys, and we're just having just a beautiful conversation, being able to talk together.
Well, the liner notes on the album capture it perfectly. It said, experiencing a cosmic vibration performance is an awakening of one's senses, provided you will allow this. And that's exactly what it is. And the first time I heard the band together, that's exactly what happened to me. And I was not expecting that. I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was going to be great, but that's exactly, it's an awakening experience or awakening your senses. And on this album, the sound is amazing. You can hear each player's instrument very clearly.
Yeah, and that's thanks to Scott Fraser. We did the original recording in his studio and a few overdubs in there as well. And then final mixing and more overdubs was with Tony Green in his studio. And in fact, Tony plays on a track on there. He plays upright bass and cello.
What you were saying about Dwight's energy, it comes through on the whole album, but particularly on Nature's Vision. It was so energetic. His voice, the whole piece is just very powerful. And a little bit later on How Long?
Oh, yeah.
That's wonderful. It's a poignant song, but it's upbeat. And is that a clave sound I'm hearing? Because the song says how long, and it's like it's keeping time.
Yeah, I think that might have been Durf.
Okay.
Because he would oftentimes play clave. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Durf playing that.
It comes together just so beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
Where can people purchase the CDs?
At this point, it would be just to contact me.
Okay.
That'd be the easiest. At this point, it's only CDs are available. Not that many at this point, but there are some. As far as I know, the vinyl is all gone.
Oh.
So
I could see why.
Any of the audiophiles out there, sorry about that. CD only or download. Okay. And I can direct anyone who needs to get the download. But that project was so wonderful for me in many, many ways. I actually had artwork that I had created for that, but the label we did this with, their policy was that they have their own artist, and that's not uncommon. So the artwork that's on there, which I really think is great artwork, other than I think that the font was a big mistake. It's really difficult to read that cover. But going further with this is Dwight gave me the privilege, because I co-produced this. This is my first venture at co-producing a project this magnitude.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He said, it's yours, man. He said, what's the title of the project? And what are the titles of the tunes and sequencing and all that? I did all the titling. I did most of the sequencing. And then we brought Tony in to help us with that, to figure out which songs would follow the next. And then Dwight allowed me to to give him some vocal ideas of things that he could use. Of course, he made the magic with it. But the one in particular is Old Bop, which, interestingly enough, on K-Jazz, that's the only track that they'll play so far anyway. But Old Bop is Pablo backwards, because when we work together, it's always like each person takes a chance to open up a piece. And so when it was Pablo's time to do that, he was standing next to John B. and he said, let's do this 6/8 thing, man. And so they started playing it together, and then we all started joining in. So that was his contribution, was that 6/8 pattern. That I don't think it stays in 6 through the whole thing. And then I came up with, that's Pablo's tune, but I'm not going to say it's titled Pablo, so I flipped it backwards for Old Bop. And you'll hear through the piece that there are times that Dwight will repeat that Old Bop.
Yeah.
Old Bop. So then I said, Dwight, I don't know if do you know the word ashe?
I have heard that.
So ashe, they say it in Brazil, but they also say it in parts of Africa. And ashe is giving it to spirit, is basically what it is. And we usually say that at the end of our spirit circles before we perform. Dwight will give us words, and we'll give blessings and allow creativity to flow. And then at the end, usually we all say ashe. So you hear Dwight singing that in there too.
Oh, that's cool. I thought maybe like a prayer or a mantra. That's really cool. It's a wonderful album. And if people want to experience cosmic vibrations, which I encourage strongly, reach out to Breeze.
Yeah, we're working on a new recording because we had to replace 2 members in the group. And we decided that we didn't want to bring someone in playing the same instruments, just out of respect.
Yeah.
And I mean, quite frankly, nobody played like Durf. Durf is, oh goodness. There's a really interesting panel discussion with us not long after the release that we talk a lot about Durf. Anyway, point is, the new band is Peter Jacobson on cello. He has beautiful use of electronics on his instrument. And we found out through our last concert that he also has a really wonderful voice. So he may be doing a little bit with Dwight on that. And John B., he's so busy with his grandson, and he's living so far away now. We now have Tony Green on upright bass and electric bass. So that's the new lineup. We've already premiered that group, but that group will be the next performance at the World Stage on the last Friday in May.
Nice. Okay.
Do you notice how I just slid that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about your dates coming up. So the last Friday, that'll be May 31st, people. May 31st at the World Stage. That's great. How exciting. New sound, like with the cello and the bass. That's going to be amazing. Yeah,
we have a video from the last concert that we're working on now to put that out probably at YouTube.
Let me know when it's up.
And to go back to with this group, this is the perfect example of, because of the way that we all work together, of what we talked about earlier. There hasn't been a single time when we finish playing that at least one person comes up to each one of us and tells them an experience that they had during the concert. It's always happened.
That's amazing. That just gave me chills. That's great. And it's true. I can testify to that. It's true. It's an experience. Well, thank you so much, Breeze. Can you tell us where people can find you?
Well, my website is an easy one, Breeze Muse, the 2 words stuck together, BREEZEMUSE, breezemuse.com. You can find a lot of things there. I haven't updated that for a while. Apologies. I will have that updated, and there will be a section on there for upcoming performances. And who knows, maybe somebody would like to have a piece of art on an exhibit or something. Hint, hint.
Yeah. Yeah, you do show your work and you sell your work. And I didn't even realize, I've known you for several years, and I always knew you as a musician. It wasn't until years later I realized that you were an artist, a painter as well. When one day you had started sharing them a lot on Facebook, some of your works, and you get a lot of great reactions from them, and you have people that buy the work. And it's no wonder, because they're beautiful pieces. So keep doing it.
And to mention that I don't spend as much time on Facebook as I was, for a lot of different reasons. However, I'm very active on Instagram. On Instagram, you'll find me, again, Breeze Muse 888, the numbers 888.
Okay.
I love 8s. I learned about 8s, not only in music, but also in martial arts. In martial arts, they would tell us that if we did our rounds, our movements in 8s, that it is reflective of the fact that if you turn an 8 on the side, it becomes infinity.
Right. So, yeah.
Breeze Muse 888. That's Instagram.
Breeze Muse 888. Check it out. Okay. Well, Breeze Smith, thank you so much for your time today. It's been enlightening and wonderful.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And as we would say in Danish, tusind mange tak. 1,000 thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.